my name's Daniel, aka HashLips, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be exploring the world of APIs and how we can use it to build quick dApps. You can build applications, and the Web 2 space is filled with APIs. Now, we're going to be taking a look at an example from Opensea and what their APIs provide to us to use to build our gallery app. For the dependencies, please make sure you have Node.js installed. Then get yourself an IDE, which is just a code editor. I love using Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to get this as well. Then we're going to be basing this on React, which is a great JavaScript library for reactive code, meaning that whenever state changes, we get to do certain updates. Then lastly, we're going to look at Ethers.js, which is going to be our connection to the blockchain via MetaMask, so we will have access to the person's account. And we will need that for interacting with Opensea's API. We can then read certain data bits and pieces from this API, making our gallery app. Before we can start, what is an API? Well, API stands for Application Programming Interface, but that doesn't really help us out a lot. The only thing that I want you to understand is that an API acts as an in-between communication that gets some data from a source. I am not talking about the protocol on how data moves back and forth on the internet. All I'm talking about the tools that helps facilitate us query that data. Imagine a person sitting at a table, and this person is busy eating, so that's our table. This is a restaurant, and that is me. And here we have a waiter. So the waiter has a order book, and they take the order from me, right? Then this waiter, so I tell the order to the waiter writes it down, and the waiter goes to the kitchen, which is like this. There's someone cooking the food, and the waiter goes and places the ticket there. The kitchen makes the food, and the waiter comes back with the food in hand and delivers it to me. This waiter can be seen as the communication between me and the kitchen. So in its basic form, this is how an API works. You give a request to the waiter, and the waiter goes and retrieves it. How that process works over here is irrelevant to the client. All the client cares about is getting his or her burger meal. And that is how an API works on a very, very basic level. You don't have to understand the basics of an API and the integration part in order to use it. So let's jump over to Opensea and see what they provide to us as the waiter. So if we want to look at what Opensea provides to us, we can go to the docs on opensea.io and then go to the API reference. This is a list almost like a menu at what we can get from this platform. Here you can see all the different GET requests, which is read, and we can see that here we can retrieve some assets. We can also retrieve collections, bundles, retrieving a single asset, and so on. If we select one of these GET requests, we can see in the middle there's some more information on how to use it. And then on the right hand side, there's actually a method that you can use. In this case, it's JavaScript. If you don't see JavaScript here, you can just click on these three dots and choose the technology that you want to query this from. We're going to be making use of JavaScript. But the true thing that we only need is this URL. So if we go and take this and we go to any browser and paste it here on the top, we are going to get back JSON data. We can also go back and click on the try it button over here. This executes the fetch request, which is a browser concept of fetching data. So I just wanted to show that it can work both ways, and this is also the same equivalent. Now, some endpoints like the assets will be protected by a API key. Sometimes APIs allows for you to enter a security key to make sure that it is you calling it, and sometimes there is paid endpoints that you need to pay for. But for the collections over here, you can try this out, and we can actually try and get the NFT collections back that we own. To illustrate this a bit better, I can go to my profile, then go ahead and copy my address. I can go back to the API, and down here in the query params, I can set the owner as a query parameter. We can see that the asset owner is indeed entered there. And when I try it now, I should get back collections that's associated to my address. How cool is that? So what we'll do is we'll use this to read the data in React. Let's go ahead and spin up an application. In order to start a new React application, we can go ahead, open Visual Studio, open a new terminal, and then we can actually go ahead and say File, Open. And I'm going to go to my desktop where I've got an NFTs folder and simply open this location. In the terminal, if we open a new one, we can type in npx create -react -app and then space, type in a name for your app. I'm just going to call it the gallery, like so, and then hit enter. This is going to start up a new React application, and then we can simply open that and start. Now that it's done, you can see we can run these commands to build it, to start it, and then play around with our app. But we need to be in the root directory, so we need to be inside of this folder and not outside. So what I like to do is reopen the application, but this time selecting the folder that was created for us. That way, when you open a terminal, you know you are in the root directory, and then we can simply type in npm start. That command should open your browser, and we can see that we are hosting it locally. And now we're good to go. So whatever we're busy doing, changing in our application will reflect there. So on the left, we have our basic React app. This is not a React tutorial, but basically the main files that you should concern yourself with are in this source directory. We get the app.js, which is the application that we just saw there on the browser. You can see there's the paragraph tags and a link, learn React. So you can see it reflects exactly what's here. And it also has some CSS attached to it. And then when we get to the index.js, this is actually the wrapper, and this is how React works. It puts the app inside of this wrapper and then attaches it to the DOM, which means your application is now React and you can actually manage state a little bit better. But regardless, we're going to focus on this app.js, and we can go ahead and clear it out a little bit. We don't need this kind of header section. So in fact, I'm going to remove all of this and maybe just keep this div. I can also get rid of this logo because we're not going to need that. So now we've got a basic app, and also if we go back to our browser, it's empty, right? We just have a simple div. We can press Shift-Command-C to get into our developer mode, checking out the console, which we'll need to do to check the API request coming back. Don't worry about this. This is a React related warning. Or you can also right click and click on Inspect. This will give you the same developer view. And then click on console. Now that we have that, let's flesh out our app and just do some basic tests before we put any UI elements here. I think the first thing I want to show is how we can set up the fetch call to go and fetch that data and display it in our console. This is fairly straightforward. So what we can do is go back to the API, and we already have this that they're giving to us. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. This is JavaScript. So remember, you can change the language up here if you want to. Now I'm going to go into Visual Studio, and then here at the top, we can place this in, but I don't just want to paste that. We actually want to wrap it in a function. So I'm going to create a function and call maybe get data. And this is going to be an anonymous function. So we can put it in there. And then here we can see we're getting back the response anyway, and it will console.log. Now in our div, maybe we can create a button like so, and a onClick method so that we can actually specify we want to call the getData function, this one. And that's as simple as that. Let's go ahead and click on the button and see if we can get back that response. Just give the button a name, so maybe get the data like so. Save this, then go back to the application. There's our button. And if we click on that, it will do its thing, query the data. And here you can see on the console, there's a whole array of data bits, right? And it comes like in a pagination form. Now, if we go back to, and we can open one of these up and go and check what it is, it's an array. And then it basically contains, by the look of it, a collection, right? And we can see kind of the banner images. So we can do a lot with this API. But if we go back to the code, we can see that here you can also set the limit. So we can also set the limit of giving us back only maybe the top 20. So if we save that, go back, refresh, and click on get data, we can maybe put some loader icon there. But for now, we can see we're getting back 20 requests. Now, like I say, these are all the collections that are associated with my address, because there it is. We can make this function a bit more dynamic to have the address being replaced after we get it from MetaMask. But now that we know we can get data back, let's go ahead and integrate the MetaMask part where we get to read the person's address. So in order for our app to have a connection to the blockchain, we can use the MetaMask provider, the kind of extension that is in the browser. And how do we do that? Well, we can make use of Ethers.js, which is a nice library that interacts in that way, giving us that connection. So what we'll need to do is firstly install it. So I'm going to copy this, go back to my application, and then the terminal, press Ctrl+C to cancel the server, and then maybe Command-K to clear it out. And then we're going to paste this to install Ethers. After installing Ethers, then we will have the library to play around with. And there it's done. So now that it's done, we can go ahead and import our Ethers library here at the top. So import Ethers from Ethers. So there we go. And now we can consume this. Currently, this method is sitting outside of our application, which is fine for now, but we might move it inside here. Definitely, we're going to do this part inside of our function, so inside of the app. And the next part is to find the provider. So looking at the provider, we can actually see that we have to implement these two lines in order for us to connect. Now I'm going to copy that and go back to my code, and we can paste it up here. But for now, what I'm going to do is just comment out everything. Well, we don't need these comments. The first line just gets the provider, and this line over here, this asynchronous call, actually connects us. So I'm going to comment these out for now. The reason is because I first want to get some state so that we can save the account variable. And how we do that in React is something called using a hook. And the hook we can use is the use state hook. How that works is we get a setter and basically a getter. So the variable and how we change that variable. Let's go ahead and create that. We're going to create a constant variable, and we need an account and a set account like this. And this is going to equal the use state hook. Now you can see if I do this, I'm just going to set this to an empty string, but it imports it here from the React library. Now we get to use the set account, passing it a value, and it will give the value to the account variable over here. And that's how it works. By default, the account is an empty string. Now what we can do is create another function. So this time the function is going to maybe not say get, but connect, like so, and anonymous function. And then we're going to drop these two in here. Now this anonymous function needs to be asynchronous, so just add that, uncomment these two lines, And here you go. This will connect, but what happens after we connect? Maybe we want to save this value that's being returned, but we don't know what's being returned. So what I'm going to do is say const, and well, let const maybe let, and we will see what the response is. After the response is there, we're going to console.log this out, and we will see what the result is over here. And then we need to connect. So let's create another button down here, and this time call the connect on there, like so. And just for order's sake, I'm going to cut that out and also just paste this inside of our actual function so that everything is nice and enclosed. So let's go and test this out. In order to do that, we need to start our application up again. So in the terminal, run npm start if you haven't already started the application. Okay, so we have a connect and get data button. We know the get data works, but now let's try the connect. I'm going to click on connect, and guess what? It brings up my MetaMask and it wants me to connect to an account. Now I will do so, click on next and click on connect. Once it has done this, we can actually see that we're getting back this array. And the array, the first account is the active account that you are on. So this is what's being consoled out to us. So we can safely say that we can store the first variable in the array as our address. So back into the code, once we get the result back, we can technically call the set account, and instead of logging it out, we can say this should be the response, right? And at index 0. This will then give us an account, not an empty string, but indeed the actual account that we need. And then once we have the account, we can then call the data on that account. So we need to make this method dynamic that we spoke about earlier. Let's go ahead and replace this with backticks on the side. And then for the address here in the middle, we would like that to be dynamic. So I'm going to wrap it like so with a underscore account, because I would rather like this to be a variable inside of this function instead of it referring to the outside account. Now that we have that, when we call data, we would need to pass in a account. With our function updates, we don't need to call the get data over here. What we can do rather is go ahead and get the data once we have the user's address. Now it's important to note that these are two separate functions and really work independently. We don't need the address to have this work. We can simply hard code it, but to make it dynamic, you can connect to any wallet and see your NFTs, right? It makes use of Opensea as well. I do want to mention that you can, however, interact with the blockchain directly and get that data back too, which might be a video on its own. But for now, we make sure to get the data once we connect, and let's make it visible. Inside the HTML here at the bottom, let's give it a paragraph tag, and let's put in the account. So we're going to put the account there, and then lastly, I'm going to make a data state. So instead of setting account, I'm going to have a set data field, so that when we get the data back here, we're going to basically be able to set the data first as well. So we're going to enter it in here. Set the data would be the response. And there we go. The data coming back here is an array. So we can maybe make the starting data here an empty array. Perfect. Let's save this, go to the browser and see now what happens when we connect. We should see our wallet address pop up, especially if we've signed it, as well as data being returned. So I'm clicking on connect, there it goes, and here comes our data in. Works beautifully. Now let's do a quick card and get this data to display on our gallery. So we've seen the data, but these are collections that we are getting, and we need the assets. So for that, I'm going to replace my URL with this. So instead of the collections, we're going to get the assets. So I can save this, go back, and then if we connect, we are getting a list like this. And inside here, there's an extra element called assets. And then with a next key, if you want to do pagination and so on, we're just going to focus on the assets in here. That means in our code, we will need to go ahead and take the assets, and when we get the data back, we will need to assign not just the response, but we'll need to assign the response.assets, like so. We can see this working if we put a simple console.log up here, and we log the data attribute that we have here as a variable. So let's save that, refresh. You can see it's empty, but when we connect, it fills up. Here we go. And now we have that list again, and each one of these is an NFT. Each NFT returned to us by Opensea has a tremendous amount of attributes. We even get the original collection that it's coming from, but we have things like the token ID. We also have the image URLs, some descriptions about it. We've got everything we need to set up a little base card. I think what would be nice is if we can get the name of the NFT, display it, and then go ahead and put a picture as well. Everything that I'm going to do from now onwards is Web 2 stuff. So we'll just do a basic example to show you how it works. But if you would like to see more of these examples and how we're going to style this gallery app or some app like this, let me know in the comments as well. Let's go and set up a base card that can utilize some of these attributes. To show you the start of the process, how React works is you can map over a data set. So we already have our data, and then we're going to call map, which we can then go and change and manipulate the data. But in essence, I'm using map to iterate over the selection of data. We then give it an item. So I'm just going to say this is our item, and we want to return something. Each one of these items represents one of our NFTs. So we can technically call this NFT. And then we can go ahead and return something. So the thing that we need to return is a one element. So I'm going to start off with returning a div element. Okay, so we're going to return a div. And to make things simple for you to understand, I'm going to put a p tag in here and say, well, we want the NFT.name. And hopefully this is the structure. If we go and see, yes, there's a name. So we should get HashLips Art Engine. Well, let's do the token ID as well. So we're going to create another p tag. So, and then the NFT, well, we need to put it in these brackets. So NFT.token ID, and let's just wrap this one here as well, like so. If we save this and go back to our app, we can actually see them listed out right here. We are halfway there. The only thing left is to add that image. For the image tag, we can see Opensea conveniently gives us the thumbnail. So I'm going to grab that, go back to my program, and in here, give it an image tag, self-enclose that tag, assign it a source, and the source is going to be the NFT.thumbnail. And then maybe we'll need to give it a width, and I'm going to equal the width to maybe 200 pixels and the height 200 pixels. Well, 200 might be too much. Let's do 100. And then the same thing for the height. I believe you can also just do that. So save this, go back, and here we can see the NFTs that is rendered. Now there's a lot of these HashLips art engines because I own a lot of them, but there you can see it's a different one as well. Now this is it. You know, you can go ahead and style this however you want to. You can make use of the Opensea API, and this is how simple it is to basically set up an app, and because we are connecting it to MetaMask, you can do way more stuff. You can also sign your signature on there and interact with certain contracts. That is how cool it is. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video session and if you would like to see me do more of these little bits and examples. Till next time, have an amazing day.